everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started at 7:30. Today is Monday, May 15th. This is the committee meeting of the RTM. Will you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic which stands one nation
under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
It's okay. I didn't have it. No. Earlier today, but
Thank you. Our first item this evening is to hear a presentation about the Rooster River Grant, and Bill Hurley is here from the Engineering Department. Welcome, Mr. Hurley.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Bill Hurley, the Fairfield Engineering Manager, and just to highlight the request, Connecticut DEP and the town of Fairfield hired consultants to produce a hydraulic study for the Rooster River back in 2003. The report contained hydrology, flood stage, water surface elevations, and conceptual improvements within the Rooster River floodplain. The lower portion of the watershed has experienced significant flooding in the past in the Brentwood, Fairchild, and Commerce Drive neighborhoods that are close proximity to the river. The purpose of this request is to update the 2003 report and revise improvements. Since 2003, the state of Connecticut has revised the rainfall data for the state as rainfall intensities have increased over previous models, and updating this data and incorporating the developments will result in a more accurate model for the region. If there's additional grant funding available, or when it becomes available, updating the hydraulic report and models may increase our chances of receiving funding. It would also save significant time of about 1 year as opposed to having to update a study, that's 15 years and older. The scope of the services, as I mentioned before, would incorporate watershed changes, hydraulic model changes, and impacts to the recommendations would be provided. The cost of the study is $30,000. Funding is 100% state reimbursable and was supported by all of Fairfield state representatives. Work would begin soon, probably days after it gets signed off and the town and state agreement is finalized. And the consultant is aware of the project timing, and they have until December 2018 to complete it.
Great. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next item is to hear a report on the aggregate pile, and Mr. Michelangelo and Mr. Carey are here to present.
Good evening, Joe Michelangelo, Director of Public Works. Brought along a map just so I could use it as reference, and I don't think we've ever given an update on this project before, so I'll start out from when I got here in September 2012. So just to orientate ourselves, so this photo is from an aerial from spring 2013. So this is the area where the activity goes on, and just to orientate yourself, here's the bus yard, obviously, the Harvest New England yard. So to access this, you actually have to come into the Public Works yard by the salt shed, and it's tucked away in back. So we've done this for probably over 2 decades at this location. So the Public Works Department generates quite a bit of material. We call them spoils. So everything we do from like street sweeping, cleaning catch basin, drainage pipes, drainage outlets, combing the beach, the maintenance type operations, and even construction. Whenever we're tearing up a parking lot or a road and putting new material down, we're always generating spoils. So we do it. Every Public Works department that I know of does it. If you go on Google Maps, you could probably find every town garage by looking for the brown or gray stuff. It's one of the things that nature of the business. So over the last 2 decades, Public Works has always used this for this purpose, to dispose of material so we don't have to pay to truck it to some other location out of town. And also, there's some beneficial reuse. Some of the material is decent, you process it, you reuse it for future construction projects, so you don't have to go to an O&G and Tilcon and buy native material. So over the years, there's been various degrees of success and non-success over that. One of the things about the previous contractors, they weren't there full time. When we needed material, they wouldn't be available. When we needed to buy material, get rid of material, they weren't always there. Some of the problems was that when we had the pile, and I said the mixture of different uses, a lot of times they would scavenge out the decent stuff and leave the worse stuff behind. So instead of making it better, it was actually worse. So the pile stayed pretty consistent for years, so it didn't achieve the diminishing. And from the reports of Rich White, we always had some historical backlash from our neighbors regarding the pile. So one of the things we did in spring 2010, we wrote an RFP, and we thought it was a good RFP, to get a contractor in there that was more proficient with dealing with construction aggregates. There's a lot of guys throughout the state, dozens of guys could have did this, but basically an operator that processed materials, so both we could get rid of it and they could make new stuff for us. So that was started in spring 2013. One of the strategies that the contractor used was to bring in additional material with the argument that this would make the product more sellable, make it more valuable. So we went through the contract for about 3 years, and over the 3-year period, there was concern about the growing pile. We had quite a few traffic issues with amount of trucks coming in. There was the noise coming from the facility. So those were legitimate complaints and arguments, and we tried to address those as we got along. And one of the, as we were going through the contract, we were always optimistic that the contractor, the strategies that they had would turn around, that they would come through, and in the end we would see a pile reduction. So in fast forward, so we went on the process for about 3 years. In September of 2016, the contract was running out December 15th. We notified the contractor that we had no intention of extending the contract, but still, we still had hope that from that point, from early September 2016 to December 15th, we still had hope that they could reduce the pile by finally turning the corner. There was always the promise of the next job will come, the next job will come. We're this close. And unfortunately, that day never came, and we never saw the reduction. One of the things we did to protect ourselves, beginning when we terminated the contract, we had a licensed environmental professional, an LEP, conduct spot inspections there, take periodic samples of any material that were suspect. And one of the last visits there was on November 29th, and the results for that did come back positive, as most of you know, for PCB and lead. So when we found that, the contract was terminating on December 15th, but before that, we immediately shut it down. So since December 13th, the site has been locked up, so to speak. So where we stand now, and I'll distribute the latest update that we've sent to our, that we have posted on our website, which has a good link. So where we are now, we have from the contaminated material, we have a bid that was out. We received the bids back. So there's a small section, or there's a section in the pile of contaminated material with PCB and lead, Brian, or just PCB? PCB and lead. So we have a bid that's out. We have a price for that, and we'll be going for the transfer of funding to pay for that within the next several weeks. So that's the remediation part of the identified area. As far as a future of the pile, a couple things. We've had a series of public meetings with the residents there. We had one in, I believe, in June of 16, 2 in the fall of 16, and 2 of them this year. So a couple of things that we've been dealing with. We had a landscape architect from University of Connecticut who was very well received. A couple of things we want to do is to utilize some of the material to create an embankment, a landscape berm along the southern periphery of the property to screen some of our neighbors. So that has a couple of things. It will block the visuals from the Fairfield Beach neighbors, and it'll use up some of the material in the pile. Another thing we did, we had a Phase 1 environmental assessment, which was conducted in June 2016, which identified this entire area here as being a historic landfill dating back from the 50s and the 60s. So another thing we're going to do in conjunction with grading that berm is to formally cap that landfill. Along with that cap, we're going to install monitoring wells along the end, along the outside. And what those will do from now for a 20, 30-year period, that'll document what, if any, groundwater issues we're having. And once again, that's from the historic landfill. So one of the things we know there's material buried here, which is a fact. One of the things we want to record is any of that material going south and east. So I've tried to highlight some of the big issues there. As many of you know, the town has filed a suit against the contractor involved for the failure to reduce the pile and the monetary damage associated with that. And there may be others coming too. The state of Connecticut has a pretty good website now that's user-friendly. The link is on here, and it's constantly updated. So instead of me going into the details of the case, everybody could click on there and see every affidavit, every motion that's been filed.
Great. Mr. Carey, did you want to add anything?
I mean, I got involved in November 29th when the material was actually found to be contaminated on the site. It was actually December 13th that I went up there for the first time, and we shut down the site and had the DEP on the property. I've been kind of handling the remediation phase of the project, which is there's an isolated area on the northeastern side of the pile where actually the PCB polluted material was dumped, and we had subsequently in February gone out there and did some further investigation to delineate the material that was dumped there. It seems to be from a demolition source, a building source material, which is common for PCBs and lead to be present. We also tested for asbestos to make sure that wasn't present, and it is not. So, not to go into the whole background, we've been doing that, for the public and for the neighbors in the beach community. But there was some uncertainty about the regulatory level because of the PCB concentrations at the site. If this was going to be regulated at EPA level or basically at a DEP level. So far, we haven't hit the threshold that would basically kick this up to a federal EPA level, which is 50 parts per million. So the remediation, cost of the remediation and the scope of the project is a lot less severe than we had thought when this material was first discovered. So that's good news. But again, the bids have all come back, and we're working on some final numbers, and we're looking to go to the Board of Finance on June 4th to move this out of some money out of contingency.
Questions on this? Representative Pine.
Can you tell us how much the contract was with Julian Development?
With Julian, there was actually a fee paid to the town. So they paid the town $9,000 a year, or $3,000 a quarter, for 3 quarters to utilize the site. And we also paid them, so whatever construction aggregate we got from them, there was a set price for that. which was generally below market rates. And other than that, Julian made their money from taking in material and selling material.
Okay, in your affidavit you filed to court, you sought damage of $3 million for the town of Fairfield, is that correct?
Correct. That was, and once again, that doesn't include the remediation portion, just the amount of material on site.
And they don't have a performance bond, although originally they had one, is that correct?
Well, their performance bond for the project, I think, was $50,000, which this is obviously above and beyond that.
But they don't have one in effect. I mean, my understanding from your affidavit was that they had a $50,000 performance bond, and then they didn't renew it. So by the time 2016 rolled along, they had no bond. Is that correct?
Okay. And I'm not sure that's in my affidavit because I'm not the one who checks the bonds. So.
Okay, can I just go over some figures real quick, in indulgence of the moderator?
Sure.
So, started out with 40,000 cubic yards, 56,000 tons in 2013, and now there's 120,000 cubic yards and 164,000 tons, right? So would you say, in agreement, that statement is that Julian Development LLC perpetrated a massive fraud on the town of Fairfield? Would that be a correct statement?
Okay. And once again, I don't want to. I don't think that's the accusation that belongs in here, especially when we're in litigation.
Okay, would you consider, I realize there's a civil lawsuit filed or civil action. However, in other cases, there's a parallel criminal action also filed. Would you consider filing criminal charges for defrauding a public community
Okay.
as outlined in our state statutes?
Okay. And once again, I'm not the one who would get involved in criminal charges or filing of those charges or state statutes to that effect.
Okay, there's one final question. Please indulge me here. So we've been getting complaints from, we're on the Public Works Committee, and this pile went from 40,000 cubic yards to 120,000 cubic yards. And the neighbors have been complaining about this, and I'm just wondering, did anybody in the staff notice that this pile was getting bigger?
Okay. One of the things that the Julians were doing, and once again, we knew stuff was coming in, stuff was coming out. It was a pretty dynamic pile. And once again, so that says 2013 on it. And if I could flick the page, there's one that says 2014 and 15 and 16. And it's the case where, a picture doesn't tell 1,000 words. You could look at the aerial photographs there, and it's a very dynamic pile that's hard to capture. And the data that Julian gave us didn't match the figures. And once again, that was largely determined when we were able to do a final survey in January of 2017. So we knew the pile was increasing, and once again, the contractor's logic that they were, kept, promoting or selling was that was the way that the pile was going to go down. And once again, we did have some confidence that they would, that they would get us to the promised land, but eventually it didn't happen.
Anything further? Representative Ambrose and then Representative Garskoff.
Yes, Joe, when did we first start monitoring the pile or the piles there with by environmental consultants?
In September of 2016.
16. And so that for a period of there, or for a lengthy period of time, they weren't, the site was not monitored.
And once again, I'll step back. We had a LEP monitor the site specifically for the pile locations. One of the permitting things for the pile is a stormwater permit. So there was a LEP who's also a professional engineer and licensed surveyor, Osprey Environmental, was on the site, and he did inspections, monthly inspections, and quarterly water samples for probably about a year and a half before that time period.
Should he have picked up the fact that there were PCBs or other environmentally dangerous materials that were being stockpiled there?
He did observations there. None of his observations had the type of material you would suspect for that.
I'm sorry.
No, the material that was determined to have PCBs, as I was saying, because the monitoring started after our subsequent meetings with the neighbors over the summer, and at the point when we determined that Julian was kind of not beginning to do what was required to reduce the pile, they did hire an LEP. But before that, the monitoring, so any material coming in from that site, any material that's in situ, meaning if you were to demo this building and dig, material out of a parking lot coming from off-site, coming into the facility, the Julian should be asking for data analytical for that material from anyone coming in. And that information has not been provided to us yet, and that is something that's, we've been asking for. So if that comes out through, the lawsuit, that's something we've been requiring. But the material that has the PCBs in it is significantly different in its consistency. It's demolition material, as opposed to, there's concrete and brick and smaller stuff that's in the larger pile. But this is, you can tell it's coming from a demoed source.
In September of 2016, we decided not to renew the contract with Julian. Was it at that time that we discovered that that there were these harmful substances being deposited at the site?
It was probably about 2.5 months after that. So it was on, the test was November 29th was the day where it was, of 16, was when it was observed and the test samples were collected. So nothing before that and any of the other visuals or chemical analysis.
So the pile, because it has asphalt in it, has what's called ETP. It's got petroleum, and then it's got byproducts of petroleum, which are called PAHs. That's always been known to be in the pile, and all of that is at low levels and it's not hazardous waste. It's just regulated waste. And when you do street sweepings or catch basin cleanings, that type of material, that type of contamination is found in that type of material. So when the LEP had gone out and done her sampling, we were finding low levels of PHs and petroleum, but PCBs and lead and metals was never detected in the pile, and that's because the source of the material that was abandoned at the site that was discovered on the November 29th sampling was obviously from a much different source of material, and where that came from is not known.
So if it weren't for the presence of the PCBs on site, would we have to cap the site?
Yes, we would, because once again, when we did the Phase 1 environmental report, which we did because of some of the concerns that came up, it identified through a series of maps and records that there was landfilling that occurred in the 50s and 60s. So it's probably something that should have been done long ago. It just came to the forefront now.
Yeah, the site has always been a solid waste unit, and that material is at depth. I mean, probably 30 feet down, 20 feet down. But the fact that the pile's there is actually providing cover for that site now. So that's actually a little bit of a benefit. But regardless of what's going on now, that cap would be required regardless.
Thank you.
Representative Garskoff.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify. So the suit is about the pile, the size of the pile not diminishing. Is it also about the contamination as well?
Not as of yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Orris, and then Representative Way.
Robin Norris, District 3. You said that the levels of 50 parts per million makes it a federal EPA concern. What is it at now?
So the highest detection of PCBs was at 16 parts per million. So PCBs are, among other things, are all the pollutants. They're regulated by what's called TSCA, Toxic Substance Control Act. So the town's had some history with dealing with this with the Exide thing this summer, where they actually end up finding some PCBs in the material, and kind of took the process in another direction, because EPA regulates anything above 50 parts per million. If it's below that and it's below TSCA levels, it's regulated at a state level. And once TSCA is involved, there's very strict sampling protocols that have to be in place, and there's also very strict landfill requirements, which will drive the cost of the project. Because there's some coal-mingled waste with lead and PCBs, that would limit the amount of facilities that would be able to accept the material. So we have been in discussions with DEP to allow the material, because it doesn't meet that regulation, to basically go out at a much less conservative level to disposal sites that are within the region, rather than, you know, some of the Exide waste was going to Alabama, which you can assume is going to drive the cost extremely high.
Is it a follow-up on that, or on that? Okay, hold on. Representative Way.
Yes, Carol Way, District 5. I feel as though this is a little bit of deja vu all over again. If we remember the Metro train station and what we got stuck with in terms of having to take care of all of the contamination there, the town paid for all of that. And I'd like to kind of follow up a little bit with the approach that Mr. Pine was taking, because Mr. Julian is supposedly an upstanding member of the Bridgeport Regional Business Council, and he has also been the head of the Barnum Festival as the Barnum Ringmaster. I think in terms of his ethics, we really need to pursue this. This should not all be put on the town of Fairfield in terms of the cost for the cleanup and, you know, really pursuing this, because he has a reputation of being an ethical person, and this was not an ethical act.
Thank you. Representative Pine.
Just have a follow-up on Mr. Garceau's question. He asked you about hazard waste from Julian. In your affidavit, I have your affidavit, I'm reading from it. In number 16, section B, your affidavit says, Julian Development accepted hazardous or contaminated materials on the site. It did not inspect each load, did not notify the superintendent of public works that hazardous or contaminated materials were brought to the site. So you're saying in your affidavit that they did bring hazardous material.
Correct. On November 29th, it was brought to the site, and that's what was detected by the LEP.
So there was, the definition between contaminated, regulated material and hazardous waste is defined very specifically in the statute. So when we're talking about hazardous waste, there was one hit of T-clip lead that was above 5, which is determined to be hazardous. But all the other samples that have been collected from the site, even after the subsequent sampling that we did in a gridded, laid out grid over the dump material, did not detect any other spot with hazardous. It's very small section of hazardous material that was hazardous for lead. We've taken upwards of 40 samples for lead throughout the pile. That was the area that was dumped, and there was no other samples. So through doing statistical analysis, you can actually kind of remove that from it being deemed hazardous as well. The PCBs are not a hazardous waste at the level they're at.
Okay, you mentioned demolition material that was deposited there. Is that from Julian?
I don't know. I mean, the LEP was on site. I mean, Julian's were the Julian development was obviously in charge of the site, but a lot of the trucks that were coming in there weren't lettered. So at this point, it's not known who dumped that. By the time the samples were collected on November 29th, When we got the results back, it was December 13th. We went to the same spot. You could tell there was more material that had also been dumped in that specific area. And that's when the DEP was called to come out and inspect, and the site was shut down immediately. And the area was covered.
Can I just clarify one thing? You said number of trucks were not littered. What does that exactly mean? There weren't Julian trucks?
I don't know. So the LEP, when she was on site, it could have been a Julian truck, it couldn't. There's no lettering on the truck to say this company or that company.
So we don't know where this material came from, just that trucks, unknown trucks were depositing demolition material from unknown sites, and we have no idea.
That's right. So that's a matter of the records that are, all the trucks we know were being, or were supposed to be being scaled in at the Julian scale house. We don't have access to the records. So when you get a scale ticket, it's going to have the date, time stamped, and the company who is basically putting that material on the site. We have not had access to those records.
Just on that point about the scale, how long do we have the contract going back to is it 2013?
2013, so approximately 3.5 years.
And we never thought to ask for the scale receipts between then and now?
We had weekly reports. No, we didn't have the scale tickets. We would get weekly tonnages from them.
But there was no supporting documentation with any of that. So basically, you were just taking them at their word with no backup.
We didn't have the backup, correct.
Has that since been remedied? Have you fixed that process?
Well, we're not.
I know it's shut down there, but I mean, when you're doing other operations, are you asking for written backup now?
Once again, this is,
Ongoing.
that was unique. So there isn't a parallel to it.
Gotcha. Representative Messina and then Representative Farnan.
Besides Julian and DPW, was anyone else authorized to bring truckloads of debris to the site?
Julian ran the site, so they would allow other contractors, non-Julian contractors, to utilize the site. But it was under their control.
And I'm sorry, the agreement between the town and Julian, was that acceptable under that agreement?
Yes, it was.
I don't get that.
Representative Farnan,
Just to clarify,
use the mic, please.
my good colleague and friend Carol Way, who I believe is a very ethical person, I would just rebut that the verdict is still out on the high ethical standards when you look at what's happened in Plainfield and Rhode Island and other places with Jillian. And then I guess my other question is, are there any other outstanding performance bonds besides this one in Fairfield, and is there a plan to address them if there are, to make sure that adequate ones are put in place?
Now, you're talking about all projects or Julian projects?
Well, let's start with Julian and then we'll expand to.
Yes. So, for instance, just about all construction projects that we go out to bid for do have performance bonds associated with them.
So, is there any other performance bonds that you have with Julian besides the one at this dump?
No, and once again, the purchasing department is the ones that holds the performance bonds as part of the bid. And Julian had the contract for the snow removal at the schools. So there was a performance bond associated with that, but currently Julian does not have any
Active performance bonds?
active contracts with the town nor performance bonds.
Do you have anything further?
No.
Did somebody else have their hand up? I'm sorry. Representative Morris?
Representative Orris again. To follow up with Representative Messina's question, and I'm ignorant. However, I've been to your garage for meetings, and when I drove up, there was a bit of a security person. I said I was here to meet with you. They let me in. How do trucks get to this pile? Do they also go through a similar security gate, and they have to write down who they are and where they're from and where they're going?
So once again, the same way you drove in, where you pass the scale house, our scale house at the transfer station, there is video surveillance there, so we do have the ability to to monitor which trucks come in, basically whatever you could read off the truck and the license plate, whatever you see on the camera, and it's a pretty good camera. And the second line of defense at the scale house there is, once again, he's recording, he's making sure that whoever takes a right to the transfer station has paid their proper fee, and he takes the ticket there. But once again, he's not collecting tickets. When a truck came up and said they were from Julian, to dump at Julian, he wasn't, he wasn't stopping him. That was, yes, you could proceed into the yard.
So then any truck, regardless of what was on their truck, said, "I'm with Julian," and they were passed through?
Well, and then once they went around the corner, they were to check in with Julian and get weighed, and it had to be accepted material. So Julian couldn't accept anything. They were only supposed to accept road debris from road construction and land type construction, and there were certain things which they were not allowed to bring in. No contaminated material, no demolition type material. So once again, we would do spot checks at the yard, and during the 3.5 years, neither myself or Mr. Bartlett observed. Once again, it was consistent with the type of material that was brought in. The LEP from Osprey Environmental, similarly, during the, from September to November 29th, the LEP specifically there, nobody observed any loads that weren't consistent with what you would expect to be at that site during the time.
And then for these 3.5 years that we had the Julian contract, after the person passed the gate, there was a Julian representative there at the site every day?
Correct, at the scale house.
7 days a week?
Oh, no, just during Monday through Friday operations. And the way the scale house was configured, the trailer sits 10 feet up from the truck, so the scale is below. So the person at the trailer could observe the truck, could observe in the truck. When they dumped, they could observe the load being dumped. So that was part of the Julian responsibility to make sure that they complied with the requirements.
Thank you.
Representative Hurley and then Representative Tallman.
Michael Hurley, RTM District 10. Thank you, Joe and Mr. Carey, for being here tonight. Obviously, this is a very difficult situation, and what's alleged in the lawsuit against Julian, if found true, I mean, it's very, very bad, and I hope that the legal remedy and the monies we're able to recoup from them are significant. But what I'm hearing tonight is just Julian, and yeah, that's important. But on the town side, where's the accountability? What is it that you're doing differently? I mean, at some point, the buck on the town side needs to stop with someone. And have there been any discussions as to who and which department bears a degree of responsibility? What type of actions are being taken place? I mean, who's responsible for this happening on the town side, or this perhaps lack of oversight?
Well, I'm the Director of Public Works, so it was within my purview to make sure that the project went right, and it didn't go right.
This is, Phil, I mean, this is your law firm. Like, should we be getting into, I mean, I believe there is a accountability question, but I guess I'm a little concerned about the time for that, because I don't want in any way hinder our lawsuit against Jillian. I mean, not that I'm kind of, the world's colliding here, but if your partner was here, what would he advise?
So this is kind of turning into a free-for-all, but so
I kind of find that offensive to say it's a free-for-all. I mean, I just asked a question.
no. Brian asked me a question. That's not normally how it works, but I'm fine to accept it. You're an attorney too. Your point is well taken. I think that because there is pending litigation, we should limit public discussion on matters that might impact the litigation. That's my opinion as an RTM member, not as a lawyer.
Understood.
Thank you. Duly noted.
I think I still have the floor, and I'm still looking for a little bit more clarity on accountability. Any other employees, any changes that you plan on making? Has anyone been reprimanded and such? If you feel as if you can't answer it because of outstanding litigation, I understand that, but to the extent you can, I'd like an answer. If you can't, say, because of the litigation, it's not something I can speak to.
The people, neither myself or Mr. Bartlett have been disciplined for this matter or reprimanded. And as far as I went through the favorable outcome. So one of the things that we do feel we will have is something we didn't have before. So it's always been a problem, but as far as the solution, which has never come up before, capping the landfill is a positive. Monitoring it is a positive. Creating a landscape berm between our neighbors is a positive. So we are in an undesirable situation, and we've outlined the path out of it.
Representative Tallman.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Brian. I guess the bottom line is, Joe, the Public Works Department should have done a better job of monitoring this situation from the get-go, correct? We kind of had the fox watching the chicken coop, and I think that's why people are so disappointed, where they were just had a free pass in and out. Nobody was checking the weights or anything else. But in hindsight, is that fair? Should we have been watching them a little? I'd love to say we can trust every contractor we hire, but you can't.
Yeah, and
we should know that by now.
Yeah. And during the public meetings we had, yes, we admitted to our mistakes that we certainly wouldn't have, didn't want to get in this situation and wouldn't do the same thing next time.
Okay. And I have one question too. We just went out for bid on the remediation, I guess, and I think it was Connecticut Tank maybe came in at about 190 or so.
192,
And there were a couple that were about $500,000 or something like that. I didn't go through line by line. I don't know if I would understand line by line, but I mean, it's almost a no-brainer. I would think they're taking stuff out and removing it, right? This isn't rocket science.
So the remediation, after we went back and did the sampling, we thought it was going to be a much more technical remediation, and in our discussions with the DEP, because it was not a TSCA-regulated site, which means you have to have all sorts of controls in place, and the sampling protocol on a 10-foot grid sampling, it can be very technical and very expensive. Once those thresholds were not passed and we were able to develop a bid document, which is actually the remedial action plan, and Connecticut Tank came in low bid, we feel pretty confident that they'll be able to perform. We do have a meeting with them Wednesday morning to kind of get all of our ducks in a row, and hope that the measures passed at the Board of Finance so that we can move forward with this quickly and kind of get this behind us. But the bids that we did receive are actually very, very favorable.
Good. And what's the $3 million what's the difference between this part of it and the $3 million part?
The $3 million is the estimated cost to not only totally remove off the site the material that Julian brought in, but it also for the material that under the original RFP they were supposed to bring out. So that's the total amount, that not only the increase that Julian caused, but the decrease they were supposed to obtain as part of their RFP.
Thanks.
I have Representative Way, then Representative Wackerman, and then Representative Gale.
Carroll Way, District 5. Joe, in connection with the cameras, are they time and date stamped? And do you have recordings for the full time of the contract?
One of the things, as soon as this came up, we got the data from the camera. Our IT department got all the data as far back as they could go back. I think it's just several months' worth. So it's not the whole length of the contract, but it's the several months' worth of data.
So we would have no way of, if we ever do get receipts from him, of cross-checking?
Just for the last several months. But we could cross-reference those receipts with the data that they did give us and show them to be, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Representative Wackerman, then Representative Gale, then Representative Ambrose.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you guys. I know this has been an additional, big amount of additional work for you, and I appreciate what you've been doing, and that's all. That's all I'm going to say.
Representative Gale?
Hannah Gale, District 6. I was actually going to ask something similar to what Representative Way asked, but then I learned from you guys that the data only goes back a few months. Is that normal for the camera data to disappear?
Well, I wouldn't say disappear, just it rewrites itself, so it doesn't go back forever. So I think that's common with just about every security camera.
Okay, so because it just seems like some sort of criminal activity occurred here, and if there was a way for law enforcement to ascertain what happened, that seems like it would be appropriate.
And once again, the amount of material that came in was, once again, we say it's in violation of the contract, but that's not necessarily criminal. The dumping of the contaminants,
yes,
did occur during the time we have the video surveillance.
Oh, so there is the possibility of finding who did that.
Well, whatever you could get off of the video surveillance, correct.
So is our law enforcement helping with some sort of forensics to match that with changes in the size of the dump?
And once again, I think it's not a local issue. It's a
Yeah, so the DEP has not issued any orders or notice of violations as of yet, and because it, and I don't want to get into this too much because of the pending lawsuit again. There may be records that would tie it to that, but it's going to be almost impossible to find out exactly, pinpoint, because it happened over a course of a couple weeks. It's just that the contractor was in control of the site. They were able to lock and close the gate, and they had a scale house. So there's records generated through the use of the scale house that may be able to piece some of this back together. I don't know, though. We're not in receipt of those records at this time.
So I'm just wondering, like, has all of this data been turned over to the police department so that they can attempt the forensics operation of matching the data from the cameras?
No, because we don't have that information. It's in receipt of the Julians. They have not provided it to us.
Okay, I need someone with more expertise on this to take this up.
All right, thank you. Representative Ambrose?
Yes, Representative Durrell had to leave, but he asked me to, he requested I ask two questions. One of which is the size of the stockpile. Does that affect the school buses and the location of the school buses?
No, it's contained to the same footprint that it was previously. It doesn't extend beyond the boundary of the site that's been used for the last 20 years.
Thank you. And the second question he had is, do you have any idea or time frame as to when the size of the stockpile will be removed?
Well, once we get the remediation behind us, then we could start working on the pile. So once again, with the remediation, between the funding and doing the work, it'll probably be, 6 weeks out from today at best case.
Thank you.
Representative Pine?
Just to follow up on Representative Gale's comment about the criminal probe. I believe, I'm not a lawyer, there are some lawyers here, but under our larceny statutes, under Connecticut Penal Code 53-119, it says defrauding a public community, which is in excess of $20,000. It's a Class B felony, and I would think that the police may be able to gather witnesses, run the plate numbers, find out where the demolition material came from, and possibly making a criminal fraud case against Julian. So I don't think that's out of the realm, and it would not interfere with the civil action, because numerous times there's civil and criminal probes happening at the same time. So I think Representative Gale has a great idea there.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this matter?
I just prefer not to go into this any further because I think it might hurt us, our case against Julian. And I think we should let the Public Works Department and the appropriate officials work on it. They know we're concerned.
Thank you.
Okay, just,
We're not going to talk back and forth to each
okay.
other.
One other final thing.
Sure.
All right, so when they look into the civil action and they find out that all these LLCs that Julian has, and, you know, they can dissolve, you guys are attorneys, so, you know, trying to get money from Julian Development, which is not part of Julian Enterprises. His address, which is in Milford, is an LLC. His no assets in his name. His residential address is in his mother's name. So, you know, you might want to consider a parallel criminal, you know, criminal action. And it wouldn't affect, I believe, not to talk back and forth, and I'll make this quick. There's numerous times where there's a criminal and a civil action going at the same time. The police could actually help the civil case.
Anything further? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here this evening. Thank you for the report. No, I'm moving on. Next item is the Pine Creek Culvert Grant. Mr. Michelangelo and Mr. Hurley's back.
Yep. Following Storm Sandy, we applied for a number of grants, and one of them we were successful in achieving was a $560,000 grant to replace a culvert on Pine Creek. This is located behind, for reference point, behind the fire training ground. Previously, there was one pipe there which regulated the flow of water in and out of the neighborhood behind it, which is into Reef Road, Lally, Penfield, those area there. So with this grant, we're able to quadruple the size of the pipe. So instead of one pipe now, there's 4 pipes there. This was a 100% grant for $560,000. The bids came in right at the number. There were several change orders, including some helical piles, which required additional funding. We applied to the Department of Housing, the supplier of the grant, for an additional $47,500, an outright 100% grant. We were awarded that to increase the total to $607,500. So this just formalizes the acceptance of the additional $47,500.
Are there any questions on this item? Seeing none, thank you. And then we're on to the WPCA generator funds and grants.
Okay, thank you. This was another aftermath of Storm Sandy, some grants available. This is a FEMA grant. The Water Pollution Control has 3 main generators, or 3 generators total. So this is a 600 kilowatt one. We got a grant for 75% to replace this generator. So the federal share is $347,000, and the local share, which will be paid for the WPCA, is $115,000. The generator is over 20 years old. It's outlived its useful life. It's an old diesel generator. It'll be converted to natural gas, so it has a 30-day runtime. That's the way it's designed for. Once again, fully funded by the WPCA, paid out of their sewer user fees. And just reviewing it with the Finance Department, because it is a town entity, it should follow the same procedure. So it's been before the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and now the RTM.
Great. Thank you. Questions on this item? Seeing none. Next up, WPCA East Trunks Sewer Line Funds and Grant.
This is a grant that we received, a $750,000 grant, which will fund part of a $2.5 million project. The East Trunk Lines are major sewer highway that conveys sewage through town, and it actually goes right behind us, which is the bottleneck here. And there's also another bottleneck beyond the metro station. So after it leaves the metro station, it goes in the area of Mohegan Concrete, squirrels its way by Vinnie's Ale House, and then it goes under Riverside Drive over there. So that's a bottleneck in our system there. When the Metro Center was built, the whole line through there was upgraded to a 36-inch new pipe. This would in turn increase the size after that to make it also a uniform 36-inch pipe. The WPCA approved this, funded out of their sewer user fees. Once again, also the Board of Selectmen and RTM. So it's a much-needed project. The original pipe dates back to the early 50s. It's one of the original pipes in our system. So it was due for replacement, and this is a good scheme to move forward with.
Questions on this item? Seeing none. Next item, WPCA Mill River Pump Station Generator Grant.
Okay.
I feel like I'm repeating myself.
Well, this is the same program as the replacing the generator at the plant. This replaces the diesel generator at the Mill River pump station, which is by the Sturgis Bridge over there. That's our largest pump station. It's currently same thing. It's currently a diesel generator fed by an oil tank. This will replace it. Natural gas fed. Once again, longer runtime, elevated out of the 500-year floodplain. Same area now. If you look at the building now on the west side, there's a fence which cordons it off. Same location, just a bigger, better, newer user unit replacing the outdated one.
All right, questions on this item?
Is that fully refundable?
75%. So on that one, same thing. So the figures on it, the feds are going to pay $120,000. The WPCA share is $40,000. So we pay 25, they pay 75.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is to hear the noise ordinance changes, and I believe Representative Farnan is going to present on that. Correct.
Brian Farnan, District 9. Now, I believe the lawyers in the room are probably well aware of the famous taxi cab case about piercing the corporate veil, Wachowski versus Carlton. Should I use my time to talk about that in relationship to Julian, or should I just do the noise
No,
ordinance?
you're here to speak
have
to
the
the noise
citation of that?
ordinance, please.
In New York.
Representative Farnan, stay on point.
So this is a pretty straightforward item that was brought to us by one of our constituents. Right now, if I wanted to get out a jackhammer on 7:30 on a Sunday morning and do some work as a constructor or developer, I could do that. On Friday, on the other hand, I would not be able to do that because the ordinance as currently drafted states that it needs to be 8 o'clock. So all we're trying to do here is just switch it out so that the morning that you have to start work later, or the noise ordinance comes into effect, would be the Sunday. Let people sleep in on Sundays, and Friday, where most workers are more likely to actually get to a development site. Have it be 7 a.m. on Fridays, and have it be 8 p.m. on Sundays. So that's the real crux of what we're trying to do here. Pretty non-controversial. We've talked to the town about this, and we. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Representative Vergara.
Hey, Brian.
One question, 16 parts.
So I agree with what you want to do with the language, but I'm reading this ordinance very differently than you are.
Oh, no.
And I'm reading your rewrite and your revision very differently. So I think that you've lost the meaning of between. So for nighttime hours, you're talking about one day starting in the evening and proceeding through to the next morning. So when the nighttime hours is written in our code as between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., that's saying that on Sunday at 10 p.m., that begins the nighttime hours. Monday at 7 a.m., and you have to proceed through the days like that. In your rewritten ordinance, it changes. Not only are there ambiguities with Monday, because you don't know what, it's implied that it's 8 a.m., but it's not specific. But yours begins at Tuesday, 10 p.m. Let's see, Monday, it starts at Monday, 10 p.m. It goes to Tuesday, 7 a.m. Tuesday, 10 p.m. to Wednesday, 7 a.m. Wednesday, 10 p.m. to Thursday, 7 a.m. Thursday, 10 p.m. to Friday, 7 a.m. And here's the change. Instead of Friday being like we want it to be, 11 p.m., you change, the language in your ordinance changes it to 10 p.m. It begins 10 p.m., then it's implied, not explicit in the way that the ordinance is written, as 7 a.m. on Saturday morning. Then it's 11 p.m. on Saturday night and 8 a.m. on Sunday, as you want it. Because I can understand that there's some implied ambiguities in the way that our ordinance is written on Sunday mornings and on Friday mornings. There's a little ambiguity, but this new ordinance is making it worse.
Well, what we tried to do was track the original ordinance and get at the issue of Sunday mornings. If you have a proposed revision, I would definitely welcome that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Monday through Friday. So Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. to 7.
But those aren't just start times. I mean, it's not just saying on Monday it's 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. It doesn't calibrate as Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You start at 7 a.m. You start at 10 p.m. and you end at 7 a.m. Because you have that word between. Because that's what nighttime is. It's starting in one day and it's ending in another. So you have to kind of logically work through what that means for each of those days. I mean, maybe if it's not clear to everyone, we should have a chart. But have you looked at any other ordinances in any other towns? Because Norwalk is written complete. They revised theirs as well. I think maybe because of this problem.
This is definitely the first time this has been brought up as this potential confusion. I don't read in that confusion. It's between 10 p.m. I read it as between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. So between the periods of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. Saturday and Sunday. Now, if you have a concern about the earlier time frame on Friday, I would entertain a revision on that. But when it comes to the overall language, it seems like the police department were comfortable with it. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I want to have something that if people can, I mean, it's right in front of you. The hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Monday through Friday. I mean, one should read that as Monday through Friday between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. The stricter noise ordinance is in effect, and then between the periods of Saturday and Sunday, it's 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. Is there anyone else who is struggling with it?
Yeah, I have to say, actually, when I read it a few times, I knew what you were trying to get at because of the days of the week, but I think if you're revising it anyway, we might as well revise it to read clearly what everybody intends.
So do you
think
have
Jill's
a
right.
proposed revision?
I do, yeah.
Okay,
I thought I had submitted it to LNA, but.
I have not seen it. If you
Okay.
want to, do you want to read it into the?
Sure. So I would suggest saying the hours between 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. beginning Sunday evening and ending Friday morning, and 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. beginning Friday evening and ending Sunday morning.
That could work,
You're
yeah.
welcome. This item is amendable, just so you know. So you're more than
This
welcome
is
to make
a
an amendment.
good
It's a matter of
opportunity for
semantics, but that is clear.
bipartisanship to address the noise ordinance wrath that we've been facing.
No, you're more than welcome to make the amendment on the floor, Jill. That's
Will you
why
send
we
it to
do
me?
these
Too?
readings.
Can you, if you send it to me, will you
I
make copies
mean, I
of
wouldn't
it?
mind working with Brian to just do it before we.
It's already on the, we can figure out the logistics. But no, at this point, it's out of LNA. It's on the floor, and it's amendable. So you can simply make that amendment.
So what I
on the
would
floor.
suggest is that if you could send that to me, I'll make copies of it, and if you propose that amendment, we'll vote on the amendment. I would accept that, and then we'll have the vote. I believe we're all, from our first reading of it, sounds better, and an improvement. And then we can vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote the ordinance, and we should be good.
Okay.
Thank you. And just so you know, this is just a first read on this. We don't vote on this until June.
And most importantly, thank you, Jill, because I do think that is a clear language. So.
When was the last time you heard a lawyer say that?
Representative Walk.
Jay Walk, District 5. I just have a quick question. How did this all come about? Like you mentioned that there was a constituent that brought this up, and what was the complaint?
That she thought it did not make sense that developers could be working earlier on a Sunday versus a Friday. So her complaint is like, why should they have the protection of a town ordinance that they can come in at 7:15 or 7 o'clock on a Sunday? Nobody wants anyone working early on a Sunday morning, but on a Friday morning or a Wednesday or a Tuesday, yeah, it makes sense. So that
I agree with that.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Awesome. Thank you. All right, so we're all good, and did you have something you wanted to add,
should we
Brian?
talk more about Wolkowski versus Carlton, the Seminole
No,
taxi
Representative
cab?
Farnan, please stay on point. Thank you. That concludes the presentation portion of our meeting. If we are all finished, we will now break out into individual committees.
What happened to?
That's going to LNA.
Why are they asking to hear that?
They're here for LNA. They're going to LNA. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. If you could pass your name cards down.